Do you believe in truth?
Yes.
Do you believe in truth? Absolute truth? Do you believe in absolute right and absolute wrong?
No.
You don't believe in absolute right or wrong? Are you pretty sure, or is it just off-the-cuff response?
I'm pretty sure.
Pretty sure. Okay, is it absolutely wrong for a man to violently rape a woman?
Absolutely wrong? No. Yeah. Same here.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. I'm here to warn you about the Matrix. This might be your only opportunity to escape. Unhook from the network and think for yourself. We're told that there is no such thing as truth. If you've heard that. We just heard it down in the cafeteria where we got on videotape. We went up to a table of students, and I asked the young lady, after about a minute of conversation, I asked her, is it absolutely wrong for a man to violently rape a woman? What did she say? She said no. We got it on tape. We've done this all over the country. Universities, community colleges, talk shows on radio and TV. Then I asked the broader audience, the 4 students at the table, was it absolutely wrong for the Nazis to murder 6 million Jews? And one guy said, I don't believe in absolutes. It's not wrong to rape. It's not wrong to murder. And you know why they say this? Because they've been taught that there's no such thing as right or wrong. Why is that? Where does that come from? They've been taught there's no such thing as truth. I've heard that all over this country. And I ask a student or a professor who makes that argument in a debate, he said there's no such thing as truth. I say, is that true? And in less than 8 seconds, you could dismantle their worldview because it crumbles. Because if your worldview is internally inconsistent, if it's irrational, then it must not be valid because you can't defend it. And if you can't defend your worldview, you should seek further and find a worldview that you can defend, that's reliable. So when they say there is no truth, and we ask, is that true? We've just disproved their fundamental idea. So then they modify it, and they say, well, you cannot know truth. And we ask, do you know that? Or they say there's no absolute truth. And we ask, is that absolutely true? See, if you're going to build your life on a set of ideas, make them stable enough so they cannot be destroyed within 8 seconds. If someone tells you that you can only know that which you can learn with your 5 senses, ask them, which of your 5 senses have told you that? Is it your sense of taste? Did that tell you that you could only know what your 5 senses can tell you? For me, that doesn't pass the stink test. I could smell a fish in that lie, that you could only know what your 5 senses tell you. It turns out that you can know a lot beyond your 5 senses. For the young women in the room that hope one day to be married, not all women want to be married, but some do. Some few do. And if a woman, before she commits herself to a man for life, she wants to know if he loves her. And what if you've been taught that you can only know based on your 5 senses? How are you going to figure out if this guy loves you? Maybe that's not an important decision anymore. But are you going to feel it with your fingertips? Are you going to taste it and find out if he loves you? See, when you believe a lie, when you're caught in the matrix, when you've been taught not to think for yourself, but to believe absurdities, it's not just your view on God that will be destroyed. It's your life and your family. My dear friend is Brian Rohrbach. You guys don't know him. You never heard his name, but you know about his son. I had the honor of performing a wedding for Brian Rohrbach last year. And his son Danny was killed at Columbine. When his son Danny was killed, Eric Harris had a t-shirt on, and it said natural selection. And after Columbine, a few of the parents got to watch the videos that Harrison Klebold made in advance. And you know what they loved and praised? They loved Charles Darwin. and natural selection. Because the stronger organism could destroy the weaker organism, and that's power, and that's good, that's evolution, that's progress. And that's why the Nazis loved Charles Darwin. They loved Charles Darwin. And the Nazis were not the only atheistic evolutionary group that loved Charles Darwin. But you could go to the Soviet Union, and you could go to Mao in China, and to intolerant, tyrannical communist regimes around the world where they've murdered millions. But you know what happens when you go to a table in a lunchroom at a university and you talk about the millions that have been murdered? Their eyes glaze over. You talk about Danny Rohrbaugh being gunned down by Eric Harris, and that generates some degree of interest. Is there such a thing as right and wrong? Is there such a thing as absolute right and absolute wrong? I don't know what Miss Baker would say about that. But if, like so many other philosophy teachers, if she would follow in the footsteps of somebody like Bertrand Russell, then she'd say, there's no such thing as absolute right and wrong. I don't know how she'd answer that. And if any of you would like to question or comment on anything I say, please feel free. And Miss Baker, if she'd like to represent herself, I invite her. But I'm here because ideas have consequences, and your life hangs in the balance of what you believe. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, you said we could say what you said. I don't think raping women is right and wrong. I don't think it's right. I think it's wrong.
Good
I
for
don't
you.
think the Jews being killed was right either. But I don't see how that proves in being such a God.
Okay, let me ask you this. Well, we've asked that question, and there's a couple of our viewers from, I've done a national TV show in 80 cities for some years, and just a couple of our viewers are here. And I recognize you from a seminar, sir, so you were one of our viewers. You're not in this class. Is that right? Have you ever seen me ask that question on a show of a college student who calls in? Is it absolutely wrong to violently rape a woman?
Many times. You invite them in your studio after they protested something.
Right.
And ask them on your show.
Right. I ask them over the phone when they call in and in the studio. And what is the typical response? Is it absolutely wrong to violently rape a woman? What's the response?
No.
No. When I ask them, is it absolutely wrong to murder 6 million Jews? What is the typical response?
No.
When you were there in the cafeteria when we got it on video, and we walked up to a random table, and the kids said, what, how they answered the questions? What did they say?
Not absolutely wrong.
Right. Why do you think students all over this country say it is not absolutely wrong to violently rape a woman and to murder the Jews? That's why I'm here today. To warn you to get out of the matrix. They're ruining your minds with this trash. This is not intelligent. This is not the result of science and reason. This is the result of a hatred for God. Yes.
Here's a fallacy that I just saw happen. You ask this class a question, then you ask someone you brought with you. We don't know this person didn't come with you. He walked in the door with you.
You're right.
You didn't ask any person in this class.
You're absolutely right. Is it possible to rewind the tape? Is that possible? When we're done?
Oh, yeah.
And we could show this gentleman what happened to a random. Let me ask you a question. Would you be willing to bet me $1,000
I'm willing to
that I
listen
cannot
to what you have
demonstrate
to
the
say.
truth of what I said? That we have on this video students downstairs who just said it's not absolutely right to violently rape a woman. It's not absolutely wrong to violently rape a woman. And when I asked the gentleman at the table, was it absolutely wrong for the Nazis to kill the Jews? He said, I don't believe in absolutes.
Can I ask you a question?
Well, first answer that question.
No, can I ask you a question?
No,
first?
no,
Okay.
first you answer the question.
Then I choose not to answer.
Okay, I would think so. Because I think the gut feel of the group can recognize the truth of what I've said. That students are saying there are no absolutes. There's no such thing as right or wrong. As any student here, and I realize it would take some courage at this point to do anything or any gesture to side with what I'm saying. But there's any student in this class that has heard that sentiment commonly, that there's no such thing as absolutes. Anyone, please raise your hand if anyone has heard that. Anyone? Okay. So at least I haven't just made it up when I walked into the door. All right? Now your teacher talks about the problem of evil. Well, if there's no such thing as absolute right and absolute wrong, then there's no problem with evil. Because what can be evil? If something cannot be wrong, how could it be evil? If a fish can eat another fish, that's not evil. It's not right or wrong. They're fish, they're animals. If a human being kills a child and eats it to save himself money or time, then that's evil. See, there is a difference. But we've been taught, Eric Harris has been taught, that we have evolved from slime, that we are animals. There's no difference between an animal and a human being. So then we act surprised when kids begin acting like animals. And when they commit sexual assaults against the women in their lives, when they rape them, when they murder them, when they kill themselves, when they destroy their lives with alcohol and drugs. And we're surprised and we say, why is this happening? When our universities are teaching everyone that you're just animals and we can't know anything about God. You see, if you don't believe in absolute right and wrong, you have no standing upon which to accuse God of evil. Yes?
I'd like a little bit of a definition here on your notion of absolute right and wrong, because you seem to be going back and forth from people are saying there's no absolute right and wrong, and then you proceed to say people don't believe there's a difference between right and wrong. Those are two entirely different issues, and I suspect you know it.
Okay.
If you're talking about Kantian absolutes, then you owe this audience an explanation of just what exactly you mean by the word absolute.
Okay, I'll give illustrations. It's absolutely wrong to violently rape a woman.
No, I didn't ask you what is right or wrong. That's a moral issue. I asked you, please define
Right.
to understand absolutely.
And I'm choosing to give illustrations to start with. It is absolutely wrong to violently rape a woman. Miss Baker, would you agree with that?
Depends upon what you mean by the word absolute.
You are a fool. And she will destroy your life.
That's an ad hominem
As
argument.
she has destroyed her own life. Your teacher doesn't know. This is where you end up when you deny absolutes. You might someday like a God.
Pardon me for a moment. I didn't tell you I denied absolutes. I asked you for a definition of absolute, which you still haven't given me. And what you've done is a classic philosophical mistake, and you did an ad hominem argument. In other words, you attacked the person as opposed to dealing with the issue. So would you please respond to my question? What do you mean by absolute?
Okay, I will after this comment.
Thank you.
When you could not affirm that it's absolutely wrong to violently rape a woman, I called you a fool.
I didn't affirm nor deny it. I'm asking for
Is
a
it-
clarification. Before I answer a question, I'd
Okay.
like to know what's being asked.
Okay, an absolute truth that something is true, something that is true in every way, at every time, in every place, in every manner, under every circumstance. There are no exceptions to an absolute truth. Okay, will that do? Now, is it absolutely wrong for a man to violently rape a woman?
Under that definition? Yes.
There we go. You know what's just happened? In this semester, up until now, have you ever heard from your teacher that there's such a thing as absolute right and absolute wrong? Have you ever heard that from her?
This is
They
an
would have
moral
no reason.
class.
We don't teach that.
She doesn't try to teach us.
No.
Well, she's teaching about evil, about the Judeo-Christian God. That has to do with wrong, because if there's no such thing as wrong, there can't be any such thing as evil. Get out of the matrix and think. I've asked the question. Up until this moment, has your teacher ever said in the class that there's such a thing as absolute right and absolute wrong? Yes,
What
ma'am.
I've learned so far is there's no such thing as an absolute truth except for the senses and the experiences that you can perceive.
Okay, you've learned in this class that there's no such thing as absolute truth except for the senses that you can perceive. Okay, is it your sense of taste that has informed you that it's wrong to violently rape a woman, Miss Baker? Is it your sense of taste? If you've told this
I'd
class...
like to address the remark that was just made a moment ago That is not what I encourage to be believed, but that is one viewpoint that has been presented, as well as several other viewpoints that would deny that particular position.
Okay, I would ask you in affirming with me for the sake of these students that that is a lie. That you could only know that what your five senses can tell you. Because your five senses can't tell you that. Your five senses cannot tell you that you could only know that which your five senses can tell you. Your five senses cannot tell you that it's wrong to murder Jews or enslave blacks or rape women. Yes?
Just as a comment, our teacher doesn't show us any of these views and tell us which is her own, but she only teaches us what she has from other philosophies.
Yeah, I would expect that she would teach and give you the reasonable and rational conclusions of the matter. When she gives the conclusion on here, and perhaps she explained how you could refute the fallacy of the logic, the problem of evil, and she ends up with the conclusion, God, the sub-conclusion, God is not all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good. The Judeo-Christian God does not exist. That sounds like we're dealing with matters of right and wrong, God, absolutes, the very issues, the only issues I brought up here today. So then you would, Ms. Baker, you would refute the notion then that you could only know that which your five senses have told you. You would refute that as irrational?
This is not an issue that I would try to solve in about a minute and a half.
Okay, so you think that might be a plausible basis for your epistemology. You think that might be plausible that perhaps you could only know what your five senses can tell you. You're a philosophy teacher and you haven't evaluated that?
Well, no, I've evaluated
Okay,
that,
so
but
you-
I'm
have you
also
come-
not going to fall into a particular and
I understand.
less than interesting verbal trap, if you will.
I understand.
Do you really?
If you have a worldview that can be destroyed in 8 seconds, it's better to rethink your worldview. Yes, sir.
Well, when you talk about the Nazis killing a bunch of people, what do you think about like the Inquisitions back when the church killed a bunch of non-Christians?
That was evil and it should be condemned. And it could be condemned on the teachings of Jesus Christ. But the evolutionists, like Eric Harris, who murdered his classmates, you cannot condemn him on the teachings of evolution. Because the stronger animal can kill the weaker. And they do. Yes, sir.
I'm slightly confused here. I'd like you to recap.
Okay.
First of all, you said that since there is no absolutes, there's no absolute right, no absolute wrong, then the problem of evil isn't really a problem. But you just went on to say that that was evil. So you kind of say that evil does exist.
Evil does exist. There are absolutes. There is a God. And once you omit God from your thinking, you can no longer establish there's such a thing as right or wrong. There's only pragmatic or what you prefer, but you have no grounds to enforce your opinion or to condemn someone else's opinion. So that those who want to promote enslaving black men or racism, you've lost the moral grounds with which to refute them. Because back when the evolutionists said that we are all different species, blacks are a different species than whites, and then the Orientals. That's what the evolutionists said for many decades. But the Christians said no. The Bible says from one blood, God made all the family of man in the book of Acts. Paul said that. And so the Christians said the evolutionists were wrong, and we are all one species. Now, thanks to the progress of modern science, in that and countless other ways, the teachings of the Bible have been affirmed against the atheistic evolutionary world that we are all one family and that racism is wrong and racism should be condemned. If we've just evolved, we can't make that determination. Ma'am, you had a question?
Yes, I did. I was wondering if you were to stipulate for this moment that there is such thing as absolute right and wrong, and there is such thing as good and evil, how would you deal with the argument for evil?
Okay, I do. I don't stipulate. I know that there's such a thing as right and wrong. And there's such a thing as absolute truth. And that God created us. So let me deal, the problem of evil attacks God and his goodness or holiness or justice. So let's talk about God first, just for a couple minutes, and then I'll address your question. Right? Does God exist? Well, the Bible claimed that God created the universe, and the universe is wearing down, eventually will burn out and die. That's what the Bible claimed. Now, when the Bible was written, the ancients believed that the universe was eternal, that the sun, moon, and stars had always been there, and they will always be there. But who is it that has utterly refuted that notion that the universe has always been here? Who refuted that? The physicists.
They didn't necessarily refute
The
it.
physicists have told us that stars are like our sun, and they're consuming fuel and they're burning out. So that eventually our sun will die. Right? The atheists used to think that the world had always been here, our sun had always been here, and it had always been like it is, and it always would be like it is. That's what they believed. And so scientists told us that our sun was not always here, because if it had been always here, it would have been burned out by now. It would have exhausted its available fuel. And there's two of the most fundamental laws of science. The first two laws of thermodynamics. And this is what they say. A rock cannot make itself out of nothing, and a fire cannot burn forever. All right? Those two laws are the most fundamental laws of all science. A rock cannot make itself out of nothing, and a fire cannot burn forever. That's intuitive, right? So apply that to the universe. Could the universe have made itself from nothing? Is that possible?
No.
It's not possible. Thank you.
But it could have always existed.
Well, we'll address that. That's the second law. Could the universe have made itself from nothing? That violates the laws of physics. That's magic make-believe. And so physicists affirm the first law of thermodynamics, the conservation of energy and matter, which can be neither created nor destroyed, but transformed from one state to the other. The second law of thermodynamics is the increase in entropy. That's what tells us that a fire will eventually burn out. Because when a fire expends its available fuel, there's a lot of work going on, a lot of chemical transformation, and that uses energy. And the energy doesn't disappear, but it goes off in friction and heat energy. And it takes more energy to recapture the smoke and the cinders and the heat than it did originally to get the fire going. And so that's why scientists say there's no such thing as a perpetual motion machine. That's a restatement of the second law of thermodynamics. You can't have a perpetual motion machine. A scientist who thinks you can is universally called a quack, because you can't. Go ahead, sir.
Now, your idea of perpetual motion only works in a contained system.
We'll take the entire universe.
No.
The entire universe
That's not necessarily
is our
true,
system.
because perpetual motion can't exist because mechanical forces are lost due to forces of friction and such. But that force is transferred back to the environment of the system. If the universe as a whole, it is its own environment, it is its own system.
It would take more.
It maintains its own energy.
It would take more energy if the universe was expanding at speeds approaching the speed of light and flying out, and at the same time these stars are burning and this explosion was all the matter in the universe burst out, then it would take more energy to recollect the matter than it took initially to throw it out. That's why the increase in entropy law has been claimed by scientists like Carl Sagan and how many hundred others to have never been violated. Carl Sagan has written books and chapters and articles on the second law of thermodynamics, and one of his articles is titled, "In the Game of Energy Transfer, You Can't Even Break Even." So if you want to maintain that the universe is a perpetual motion machine, you can say that. You can posit that. But what you're doing is denying the second law of thermodynamics, and you're hoping all the physicists are wrong because you don't want to believe in God. Sir.
Okay, now answer her question.
Okay. I'll get to her question. Matt.
I just thought we were
What was
talking
that?
about evil.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be talking about evil.
She
You're
asked
talking
the
about
question.
matter. I don't know. I just get lost because you keep going on.
Okay. Let me
Trying different things. And I don't know
Let me
what's going
simplify
on.
it for you. We want to answer the problem of evil. But if there is not a standard of absolute right and wrong, then you can't define evil.
But you said there
Oh,
is-
hold on a second. I just want to say something real quick. Okay, could you just get to the point? I don't mean to be mean. I just mean like,
say we know the difference between absolute right and wrong. I just want to know about this evil that we're supposed to do.
Okay. I'll do
Before you
So I'll
do this,
wanna-
can I ask you to do something real quick?
Care about my
Never
Okay.
answered
Sir,
that
and
question.
then,
Do you believe that there's absolute right and wrong?
yes. Absolutely yes. Yes.
That's what I wanted you to do, just confirm
Okay.
yes or no.
Okay.
There is no standard of truth, then there is, what was the end of that?
If there's no standard of right or wrong, then there can be no evil. You can't define evil if there's not such a thing as right or wrong. And if there's no such thing as absolute right or wrong, like if it's absolutely wrong to violently rape a woman or murder the Jews, then there's no such thing as absolute evil. It's just, what do you prefer? And the Nazis preferred to murder the Jews, and the slave owners preferred to take the liberty away from men and women and children. And a rapist prefers to gratify himself. So I want to know if the rapist is absolutely wrong, and the slave owner and the Nazi, or if it's just a different lifestyle preference. That's what I want to know. Okay, sir, and after your question, I won't take any others so I can answer hers.
Okay, I believe that there's absolute right and wrong, but still, that does not, like your flag says, irrefutable evidence. How, just because there's absolute right and wrong doesn't prove there's the existence of God.
Right, there's a lot of questions to address. That's why I said, before you answer the problem of evil, you have to address whether there is a God. And the laws of physics cannot maintain, they cannot explain the existence of the universe. The universe is a mystery to the natural sciences, because it could not have created itself, and it could not have always been here. Even if you disagree with that, do you understand the scientific argument? It could not have always been here, because it would have burned out by now. The stars would all be dead and cold, and it could not have created itself. Those two observations bring us to a scientific conclusion that was made by men like Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, Kepler. In fact, almost every one of the fathers of the physical sciences believed in a creator God who made this universe and earth and man, and rejected a naturalistic evolution. Even since Darwin, almost every one of the founders of the physical sciences, men like Pasteur and Mendel, Jules and Kelvin, almost every one of the fathers of the physical sciences rejected Darwin and evolution and believed that a God created us in the recent past. Now, were they just fools, these men who defined the laws of science for us? Certainly they were educated and intelligent, and they practically universally rejected evolution and believed God created us. Okay, if there is a God, then what can we know about that God? Well, because we have a personality, because we have emotion, we can deduce something rationally. If you have a test tube with chemicals and you shake up some mixture for a long time, you might get heat and friction and all kinds of interesting things going on, but you're never going to get joy. You're never going to get bitterness, envy, lust, hatred, or love. You'll never get those things. So because those things are fundamentally who we are, people who could love or hate, we can rationally deduce, as Galileo did, as the greatest scientist who ever lived deduced, Isaac Newton, we can deduce that the Creator was a creator who could love and who could hate. That's what they deduced. Because we have personality, we must have been created by some entity that had personality. So we call it a personal God who cares about justice. Because if someone hurts one of my kids, when Brian Rohrabach's son Danny was killed by Eric Harris, that made Brian Rohrbach angry, and he was mad. And the Bible suggests when we hurt one another, that makes God mad, because he loves us. But if one person begins to hurt, rape, or murder another person, then that makes others mad. And that's the kind of God the Bible presents. So the problem of evil. If you can't hate, you can't love. If you cannot hate someone, you could not love that person. If you can't reject a person, your acceptance of that person is meaningless. The reason a woman melts on a dance floor when her fiancé takes her hand and gives her a twirl on the dance floor in front of the wedding party, she melts because she knows he could have been holding any other woman's hand at that time, but he's holding hers. And he could have rejected her, he could have raped her, he could have murdered her, he could have hated her, but he's chosen to love her. And love is the pinnacle experience of our human existence. So